Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webcast. We're going to give it another minute here before we get started. I see we've got a number of people joining. And Susan, can you hear me okay on your end?
Yes, I can. And I can see your presentation also.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, we'll give it another minute. I see some folks still joining, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. We are doing a session today. It's really more of a case study around Harkins Builders, PeopleSoft 9.2, HCM and FSCM transformation program. This is really a story kind of about the journey that they went through from beginning to end. It is a multi-year effort. I will give you some more background on that as we go. So thank you for joining. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, in terms of the agenda today, we'll do some quick introductions, myself and SpearMC. As I mentioned, this is really the kind of a transformation journey and story. So I'll give you the background, kind of how it started, what the business case and the selection process that they went through. And then I'll kind of walk you through some of the different pillars or components of the transformation program. One being Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So a big part of the program was moving from on-premise infrastructure to OCI. Second is kind of the technology and tools scope related to the implementations. And then I'll cover the HCM and FSCM pillar scope. And we should have time for questions at the end. I did want to mention just a quick housekeeping item. Feel free to go ahead and ask questions during the presentation. You please use, there's a question dialog box in the GoToWebinar that you can ask your questions. Susan Carinante is going to be supporting me in this, so she'll be monitoring the questions and she will raise them throughout. If we do run out of time, we may hold those until the end, but I think we should be okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Just introduction, myself, my name's Tom Treader. I'm a managing director with SpearMC. I've been with Spear for about 8 years, based in Laguna Hills, Orange County, California. I've been working with PeopleSoft pretty much my entire career, doing implementations, transformation programs, upgrades, adding new modules, you name it. I've started my career out in supply chain and financials and have in past years been working across all the pillars. So great to meet you all. I'll give a few slides on SpearMC. Many of you may have seen these, but we are an Oracle partner with a number of specializations. PeopleSoft being a big one. We're specialized in Cloud EPM, OCI. We're actually an Oracle University education reseller, and we can also sell the Oracle PeopleSoft applications to public sector. We recently received SOC 2 certification, so this is extremely important and we're proud of it, related to our managed services. So it just certifies our security controls and processes, and for our managed services clients, it really does mean a lot. We've also been recognized by Gartner Group for our OCI and managed services, and very proud of that. In terms of our offerings, really it spans everything related to ERP and PeopleSoft. So that includes managed services, technical, functional, system administration, testing. We do consulting across all the applications. Training is really our roots and where SpearMC started out. So we do a lot of sessions like this with Quest, with the user group conferences, and with our clients. Oracle Cloud Platform, so we'll be talking about that a little bit today, in OCI migrations, infrastructure hosting, and disaster recovery. We work with most of the emerging technologies that are out there related to ERP and PeopleSoft, and we also have some of our own proprietary products as well to fill gaps within the applications. We provided a few here, but we have a kind of a library of those. We have coast-to-coast coverage. SpearMC started out in Chicago, and we've and focused mostly on the West Coast in the early years and have moved across the US. So we're really proud to have coverage across all the regions, and actually starting to expand more internationally, along with our offshore capabilities, which we've had for many years. We are roadmap specialists, so we partner very closely with the Oracle product strategy team and always stay in tune with upcoming releases and help our clients plan for whether it's tax updates, new PUM features, new module features. In the case of Harkins Builders, I especially wanted to point this out because with the transformation program they embarked on, there were a number of features and functionalities that we were actually, we knew were on the roadmap, so we had to kind of plan the overall program and implementation to wait for some of those functionalities to be released. A big one was ePerformance. So ePerformance recently released the fluid pages, and we've actually applied those via selective adoption, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. This next slide just shows an example of what a roadmap deliverable might look like. Again, we include in the roadmap Oracle features and product development, along with internal client roadmap features and business priorities. And that's across pillars. So HCM and finance, a big part of that is planning around, annual events and processes, and, really planning the releases and implementation work around the timing windows that are best for our clients. So we definitely had to do that for the Harkins case that we're talking about today. Okay, really wanted to, this next couple slides talks about kind of where Harkins started and the scope and the process that they went through, and selecting PeopleSoft and reinvesting in PeopleSoft as a platform. Okay, so Harkins Builders is based in Columbia, Maryland. Their industry is construction management. They do multifamily, commercial, and government projects. They do end-to-end design through execution and build for properties. Their initial PeopleSoft version was 8.9 for both HCM and FSCM, so it was well over 10 years that they had not applied maintenance. They were on Rimini Street for support for both HCM and Financials. Their PeopleSoft footprint included core HR, payroll, and time and labor. So a smaller footprint there. And then PeopleSoft Financials included GL, project costing, AR, AP, and purchasing. They had many third-party applications, especially on the HCM side. They had a separate recruiting and ATS system called iHire. Benetrack was their third-party benefits administrator, so it's where they did all their benefits enrollments, life events, and administration. All their carrier integration was also done in Benetrack. Lanteria was a system that was used, wasn't a full ELM, but it stored a lot of employee certifications and was used for training enrollments. Viewpoint was a document management system and used for workflow and coding. That was on the financial side. They also had paperless pay applications and a W-2 pay stub application for employee self-service. So that was kind of their current state before we got involved. They actually went through a full system selection, and believe it or not, it happened, they started it right before COVID. So it was, and they were in the middle of the selection process in evaluation when COVID hit. So COVID did cause some delays, about a year, and then they revisited the decision. Their executive team approved moving ahead with PeopleSoft and re-implementing. You know, we were happy to obviously find out with that decision. But it was open to other SaaS applications. They looked at Oracle Cloud and a number of other SaaS applications along with PeopleSoft. The next slide, I'll talk about some of the main drivers why they selected PeopleSoft to reinvest in it. Obviously, with not having applied maintenance, they actually had to relicense HR. It was a very big decision and really caused you know, reevaluating the entire platform. In terms of the modules that were added and subtracted, both are important, but on the PeopleSoft HCM side, in order to eliminate all the third-party applications, they added recruiting and candidate gateway, benefits administration, e-benefits, e-compensation, and e-performance. So that was the HCM additions. On the financial side, they actually stayed, you know, status quo with the modules, but they did implement a new imaging system from Kofax called AP Essentials. So they're using Kofax for invoice imaging, OCRing the data, and then interfacing and loading the invoice data as vouchers into PeopleSoft. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in some upcoming slides. I mentioned earlier they were able to eliminate all their third-party applications, and by getting current, was able to leverage Oracle support for tax updates on HR, for all the PUMs and new tools. So that's kind of the background. This slide summarizes really the key points that drove their decision for selecting PeopleSoft. So I'm sure most of you are aware Oracle's 10+ year premier support, which is a rolling window that they've committed to. And we don't see that going away anytime soon. There's been many large implementations across the US. So it's still alive and well despite what you may hear. I know the US Army rolled it out to all their service men and women. So we don't see that rolling window changing anytime soon. Really the product strategy team and all the new features and improvements that continue to come out with each PUM release and each tools release, it was obvious to them that, you know, PeopleSoft is still strong and being supported well by Oracle. So that's a key point. Other drivers, the single uniformed HCM and FSCM platform out of the box with delivered integration, that was a big driver. In their current state, they had a lot of dual maintenance with the third-party applications. That resulted in data gaps, quality issues, and disjointed business processes, either within HCM or across HCM and FSCM. The ability to leverage Oracle Cloud Infrastructure was another big driver for them. They knew they wanted to be on a SaaS-like application. So by running PeopleSoft on OCI with managed services support, from their perspective, it is like a SaaS application. They're able to apply updates. There's a minimal amount of effort in maintenance from their perspective. Getting a modernized user experience was extremely important, along with mobile applications. So as most of you are aware, with Fluid and the new releases, PeopleSoft has a very modern look and feel, and mobile applications are available throughout, both in the HCM and Financials applications. They also wanted to realize lower IT and implementation and support costs. So, by moving to cloud, by using managed services, and using a technology they were already largely familiar with, that allowed them to keep their costs low from a support perspective, both for the implementation and ongoing. They also wanted to have a standard security model across their applications with single sign-on, and we were able to meet that as well for them. And we'll talk about that more in upcoming slides. They also recognized the tools that were delivered in the latest versions, the ability to personalize the applications, to build integrations with their existing. They have a third-party construction management system that was extremely important to them, and PeopleSoft delivered it all, with People tools, with the enterprise tools, and it was all included in their ERP license and support costs. They wanted standard workflow technology, which they're getting, and the flexibility to scale the applications based on their growth drivers. They have extremely aggressive business growth goals, so their business requirements are constantly changing. And the nice thing about PeopleSoft is they have that ability to add modules and configure the applications to meet those new needs that pop up. Okay, that's the background. So I'm going to dive into, again, some of the different components of the solutions that were implemented, starting with OCI. So just a slide or two here. Really, the big benefits of running PeopleSoft on OCI, technically, Oracle manages the infrastructure that includes backups and refreshes, which we are also supporting them with from a managed services standpoint. Cloud Manager enables them to automate environment deployments and standing up new environments. We've used that extensively throughout both the HCM and the Financials upgrade projects. We've needed to stand up a number of project-based environments, additional dev and test environments outside of the production stack. So OCI has been extremely beneficial throughout all the projects that we've been running over the last year or two. OCI has data encryption built in. The availability is guaranteed by Oracle, so uptime is almost 100%. And the architecture drives better performance for the applications, the database. They did move to Oracle database from SQL Server. That was one of the big projects, which we'll talk about shortly. All of this leads to decreased cost and better ROI for them. And at the end of the day, from an IT perspective and their operations, this enables them to focus really on their core business and not spend time and resources on supporting ERP and back office functions. Okay, last slide on OCI, just providing some highlights here on the work that we did. On the HCM side, we actually did a re-implementation on 9.2. So because it was a re-implementation, all the environments that we started with were built on OCI on an Oracle database with the latest tools and PUM images. So really they were able to make that leap with a new implementation very quickly. Environments were stood up within days and ready to go for the implementation. On the financial side, there was a decision to actually upgrade financials because of a lot of the historical data that they had and some of their enhancements. So we actually, rather than re-implement, we actually did a three-step project there. The first project was to lift and shift to move financials, their 8.9 financials, exactly as it was, the same tools version, same application version to OCI. That was about a 3-month project. That also included, they have middleware called Dimensions for their Procore construction application. We actually moved Dimensions to OCI, and then they had some third-party applications as well that we moved to OCI. So it wasn't just PeopleSoft applications. It was those third parties, and they remain there as well today. From the second project for FSCM, because they wanted to be on Oracle database and leverage, really the improved performance that they get from an all Oracle solution, we did a database migration from SQL Server to Oracle. That project also took about 3 months. We used Data Mover to export the data from SQL Server, import it into Oracle database. Some of the key differences involved in that is the way Oracle handles date and date timestamp fields. There's also some fields that SQL Server pads with spaces, whereas Oracle does not. So those are just some of the key differences in terms of technically how the data is stored in the database. Obviously, there's a lot more than that, but those were actually some modifications we had to make during that database migration. And that was relatively smooth. We did have 1 or 2 issues at go live, but those were quickly remediated. They did have to do with certain scenarios around the data types that I mentioned with SQL Server padding spaces. So luckily, those were fairly easy to troubleshoot and fix. I mentioned previously the last point here, just how instrumental OCI has been in supporting the HCM reimplementation and the FSCM upgrades. That enabled us to stand up and scale to the new environments that were needed. We also recently applied selective adoption for fluid e-performance. So we were able to pull in all of the fluid changes, and in that project, we are getting ready to go live with that here shortly. So that's it for the OCI piece. I will move on to the next section. So next section is really around the technology pieces that we implemented, and really highlights some of the new tools in 9.2 that we were able to apply. In terms of customizations, Harkins wasn't heavily customized, but there were some customizations. So we did run compare reports against demo to identify the custom objects. We have kind of a unique way of looking at the compare reports that also pulls in some of the metadata from the People Tools projects. That helps us identify what the customizations are in some of the documentation that was done by the developers. And that just helps us evaluate, those requirements. So we use that to document all the customizations. We went through those with the business and validated which customizations were truly required to carry forward. We bumped those against the latest functionality that was delivered with the upgrade in PUMS, and that did allow us to eliminate some of the customizations. And then that needed to remain, we were able to apply, for the most part, the lifecycle management tools, which allowed us to keep the base code unchanged, which basically allows us to keep apply PUM images and updates with less effort and cost. So we'll talk more about that in some of the upcoming slides. Here's an example of the deliverable around the documentation for customizations that we did. We refer to a lot of the custom objects as RICE-W, so reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, and workflows. So we documented all of those RICE features in a matrix. So this is an example of that. If they're, based on the custom development, you'll see the last two columns, shaded in blue. So for each of those features or development items, we kind of cataloged and identified if it was currently an active feature that was being used or if it was not being used. And if it was active, then we identified the decustomization tool or lifecycle management tool that we could target to again keep the delivered code intact. So you'll see we map some of them to pluggable application engines, event mapping for people code, and other tools. And we'll talk about that more in upcoming slides. So this slide kind of gives a summary of a lot of, not all of, but many of the new tools that we were able to apply. We applied branding throughout the application for Harkins. So some of the banners, a lot of the activity guides, we've got screenshots that you'll be able to see, but we were able to apply branding using some of the delivered tools throughout HCM and FSCM applications. Unified navigation, so that is something we're actually testing and getting ready to deploy as part of the financials upgrade. We've been live on HCM since the beginning of the year. Financials is in the final stages of deploying and going live with 9.2. So some of what I'll be talking about related to financials, it's still a work in progress, but we're actually starting testing now and a couple months from go live. So page and field configurator was applied, event mapping, drop zones. I mentioned application engine plugins. I'm not going to read through the list, but you'll hear more about a lot of the tools when I walk you through some of the screens and features as part of FSCM and HCM. I guess other ones that I could call out, the acknowledgement framework was used heavily in HCM. File integration framework, we use that for building interfaces. A lot of the employee demographic data and other common interfaces where we were sending data to multiple systems such as the benefit carriers. We were able to use file integration framework to support multiple interface layouts with a single, more or less single query and data extract. Anyway, that was the kind of a list of some of the more common tools that we applied. Here's an example of using event mapping and drop zones. So we wanted to add, this is employee self-service, directions here to click on the filter icon. So this text was added without any customization using a drop zone on that page. There's other tools available. I know we've done a lot with Oracle guided learning. It is a bigger investment, but OGL would allow you to do something like this very, very easily to walk users through transactions. But that's another session that we've done. Okay, event mapping in drop zone. So this is another look at how that is done. So this is kind of a look at the page behind the scenes. So you can see a drop zone in the header and the footer of the page. In this case, we use the top header drop zone to plug in that text that you saw on the page. Okay, from a technology perspective, other third-party applications that we used, I mentioned single sign-on. So we did use Harkins licensed Pathlock's single sign-on solution. They use Microsoft Azure for Active Directory, the ADFS, that uses SAML to communicate with PeopleSoft, and Pathlock not only does the SAML kind of communication piece, but also supports single sign-on and authentication with Microsoft. So it's nice, you know, users were already familiar with authenticating through Microsoft Office 365, and they're able to use that same authentication process with single sign-on. Telemetry is another third-party application we use for resume parsing. I have an example of that, but basically Telemetry allows candidates applying for jobs to pull in resumes and then parses the resume data to store on the employee profile in PeopleSoft. That was important for Harkins and, you know, tracking employee profiles and candidate profiles. Job Target is another application that's used for recruiting, in advertising, in data analytics around job applicants. So one of the things with Candidate Gateway in applying for jobs, we were able to insert some code that allowed Job Target to basically track metrics around their recruiting advertising, and how many candidates were actually clicking on and applying for jobs based on different sites where they were posting those jobs. Kofax, AP Essentials, I mentioned that earlier, was used for invoice imaging and OCR on the financial side. And then Procore, again, their main construction system. Okay, other pieces of the technology side. SpearMC brought to the table, based on past implementations, data conversion templates and code. We were able to leverage a lot of the conversions that were needed, code and mapping and specifications. So, we're able to fairly quickly stand up with the HCM reimplementation. Basically stand up test environments with the full data sets of active employees, job data, position data, a number of different data elements that were needed for the new application. We also had interface templates that we were able to apply for a number of the interfaces. And a big change on the HR side was moving from a third-party benefits administrator to PeopleSoft eBenefits and BenAdmin. So all of the carrier integration, for the health insurance, savings plans, all of that integration had to be moved into PeopleSoft. The other, key point, and this would be naturally implemented for anyone running HCM and financials, but we reevaluated all the delivered HCM to FSCM integration points, and we were actually able to clean up some of the integration and add some new data elements to it. So PeopleSoft does deliver over 250 unique integration points between HCM and FSCM. So we looked at those and were able to leverage some more, which added some benefits. Okay, so that's the technology side. On the HCM application scope, I'm going to skip this in the interest of time, but just in terms of the implementation methodology, SpearMC applied it's a 6-phase implementation methodology. So that was used during both the re-implementation of HR and financials. I wanted to provide some example screenshots of some of the things we've talked about already. Here's an example of telemetry on the HR side for resume parsing. So when an applicant goes to attach the resume with that telemetry integration, it prompts the user to pick a resume from different sources or upload from their own PC. So again, telemetry uses that data, pulls it in, and extracts it to the user profile. Onboarding. So from an onboarding perspective, we used the delivered activity guide, tailored it to the process that Harkins needed in their requirements. So this is an example of that onboarding activity guide. All of the data from recruiting flows through to onboarding. That was entered by the candidate who would become the employee. You'll see there's a video that Harkins plays, so you have the option to play that introduction video around benefits and a welcome to Harkins as part of your onboarding process. All of the text and train stop items on the left is configurable on the activity guide, but this is an example of how they applied it. Company directory, so we were able to, with the employee conversion, load images. So they're able to use company directory with images. In this example, we're showing the org chart without peers, so it shows all the direct reports and the report to structure. From an employee self-service standpoint, these are some of the key self-service features that we deployed. There is quite a bit more available, but we were able to leverage a good chunk of the delivered employee self-service. So I'm not going to go through all of these individually, but we've got some screenshots and examples of how Harkins was able to deploy ESS within HR. Okay, so here's the landing page for employees where they have access to all their ESS functions. We are using the announcements tile, so that's common to use before if there's holidays coming up, reminders to enter timesheets, benefits enrollment, any company-wide announcements that need to be made. That announcements tile is handy and definitely being used. You've got the open enrollment tile, company directory, time entry, accessing personal details, looking at the career page. So number of features here from an ESS standpoint. I'll show you a few of those and what those look like. In terms of time and labor, we actually did do a small enhancement around fluid time entry for the mobile or small form factor, just kind of a display and usability change that we made. So here's an example of what the fluid time entry page looks like for them. And then on the right side is another example of inquiring on weekly time reported, again, using the small form factor. In terms of open enrollment, we configured and used the delivered activity guide. So you'll see all the steps as part of open enrollment. They actually just went through their first annual open enrollment. So that was very much success. But all the steps as part of open enrollment are configurable. They add their own text. All the bullets and train stops here can be customized. Fully configurable and easy to make it user-friendly and specific to your requirements. Okay, here's another example of the benefit enrollment summary page. So you can see all the elections here. Again, this is fully configurable with the text, the order that all the information is shown, the links and resources. You'll see on the right side, there's a Harkins benefits overview document that an employee can link to get summary information about benefits to help them with the enrollments. So again, just an example of how it was deployed for Harkins. Life events. Life event setup is also fully configurable. We added a number of different life events specific to Harkins requirements. So this is an example of what that looks like. Life events such as marriage, having a baby, divorce or separation, having new dependents, etc. So all of this was configured based on required life events. Okay, this is an example of the life event configuration page. So again, it's all fully configurable. From a manager self-service perspective, here's a list of all the manager self-service features we deployed. So they span recruiting, self-service, looking at your team and direct reports, transaction approvals, time entry, and performance management. This is an example of this manager self-service page and the tiles that are available. Wanted to show you an example. This is a kind of unique implementation of workflow. So there's a ad hoc salary change request feature in self-service. This is a feature that only you have to be in management or leadership to initiate it. So again, it's salary changes. In this case, Harkins, we had a hard time designing a workflow routing that we're able to configure because there's a lot of unique circumstances and routings that might need to happen. So what we ended up doing is rather than trying to code for and set up in the business process all of those different scenarios, we just simply had the workflow approval route back to the originator so that ad hoc approvers could be added on the fly. So since that the originator was always going to be someone in leadership, they had to approve it, and they also would know who else, based on the department or division, who else would need to approve that salary change. So if you look at the screenshot on the right side, it shows you the workflow is routed to the originator, and then they had the ability to insert new approvers into the workflow for that salary change approval. They could add multiple steps, multiple approvers, and then the approval would end with an HR administrator approving it and finalizing the salary change. So again, this can be, great thing about workflow, can be configured in different ways, but in this case, we had it really designed to be an ad hoc process. Okay, got a few more pages to show related to HCM, and then we'll move on to financials. Performance management. So there's two main performance documents that we're working to deploy. One is an annual review. So this performance document is configurable with a template in performance management. You'll see for an evaluation, there's a 5-star rating that can be applied for the performance rating. And in this case, you'll see Harkins has what they refer to as their guiding principles by the acronym of DISCO. So you'll see the different pieces of their performance evaluations. So that's discipline, innovation, stewardship, communication, and ownership. So that was configured based on their requirements, based on those guiding principles. So that's their annual review process, and a process change that was done or is being deployed as part of their performance process is they were based on a anniversary cycle. So when employees join the company, their annual performance reviews were done based on their anniversary. So they had reviews that were being done and merit increases throughout the year. A change that we're making as part of this implementation process change is moving to an annual review cycle. So all employees in the whole company will go through their reviews and receive their merit increases at the end of the performance year. So just a process change that was done. There's also a 90-day review feedback form that's being implemented. So when a new employee is onboarded, the first 90 days, at the end of the 90 days, they'll go through an initial performance review. And first 90 days are critical, obviously, for a new employee to make sure they're performing well and it's working out on both sides. So the 90-day review period and form will allow managers to assess performance and fit and basically make a decision to move forward, make sure that it's working out on both sides. So that's the 90-day performance document. Okay, and that ends the HCM piece. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Susan, any questions that have come through on the polling?
So far, the main question was, will we be sending out the copy of the presentation?
Okay.
And yes, we will be sending a follow-up email on that.
Okay, great.
That is it so far.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'll continue with financials and we'll see if there's any more questions. So in terms of financials project scope, I mentioned previously, we're upgrading from 8.9 to 9.2. It is a multi-step upgrade. There's obviously several tools releases. There's a upgrade to 9.2 to get to an early PUM release level. And then we have to apply the rest of the PUMs. I want to say it's the initial upgrade gets you to something like PUM 6 or 7, and then you have to apply the rest to get current. But we've able to apply that multi-step upgrade for Harkins. We've gone through that pass a couple times already. We mentioned the single sign-on solution. It actually says APSI in here. It's now Pathlock. So that's been applied to financials. It was implemented with HCM. So I know they're looking forward to getting that with financials as well. a big part of the 8.9 to 9.2 upgrade is moving to fluid navigation, fluid security. So there's a fair bit of effort there in reapplying security and training. There's obviously a lot of user interface changes there, whether it be work centers or home pages or nav collections. We're tailoring those to meet the business needs in each area. We're implementing PeopleSoft Expenses as new with 9.2. That may actually follow the 9.2 upgrade as a second deployment, but we're working on that now. We're also working to deploy ACH payments out of PeopleSoft using, we're actually not using treasury cash management. There is the ability to do ACH payments with a couple different file formats that we're implementing with their bank. And the suppliers that we're going to be using ACH payments for includes true suppliers, but also some employees as well, that they reimburse and submit payments to. I mentioned Kofax AP Essentials, so we're implementing Kofax for imaging and OCR, and then that's going to integrate with voucher approval workflow, which is where those images are actually, I'll show you an example, they're being embedded in the workflow, and the coding for the invoices or vouchers will happen as part of the workflow process. That feature is actually replacing, I mentioned Viewpoint is an application they're using currently for that. We're also implementing a new interface with Procore. There's a transaction that they do in Procore around their contracts with suppliers. They call them requisitions, but they're actually supplier invoices. It's a type of invoice that they do related to contracts. We're going to be implementing a new interface and feed from Procore directly to PeopleSoft. And that feed is going to initially load voucher data with the invoice information. There's going to be a secondary deployment of that we're planning that's going to bring in the images of those invoices that are stored in Procore as well. So there's a really big need at Harkins to keep the images on their invoices. So we're either scanning those through Kofax, or for the invoices that come through Procore, we're going to be integrating those images into PeopleSoft as well. So they'll be accessible on the voucher pages. We're having to migrate. Yes, Susan.
I do have a few questions if you want to take a couple here.
Absolutely.
Sure. The first one is, I would like to hear a bit about Harkins' experience with Kofax, and did they evaluate other applications for this?
Yes. So yeah, their experience has been good. They were actually using Kofax with Viewpoint in their 8.9 environment. That was an older version of Kofax. What we're implementing with 9.2 is their SaaS AP Essentials. And so far, no issues. AP Essentials does have better accuracy in terms of doing the OCR and recognizing some of the data on the invoice. We did look at other applications. Kofax, and this isn't meant to be an endorsement, but in terms of their technology, their what's delivered, it's a very reasonable cost to implement. So that was a big driver for Harkins, and they did have a level of comfort with Kofax since they were using it, an older version of that application.
And the next question, have you deployed any mobile solutions for expenses or AP approvals?
Yes, so the plan is, since we're not live yet with 9.2 on financials, we haven't deployed it, but yes, we are planning mobile approvals I'm going to show you an example of the screen for invoices and for approvals and expenses as well.
Okay, and you might have answered this one in the previous questions. When you did the evaluation of the software, what were you comparing PeopleSoft to?
Yeah, we were looking at, we actually got quotes from Canon and ImageNow or OnBase. I think they've merged, but that selection was done quite a while ago. Yeah, we did look at those solutions though. And kind of what we saw with those, your volume has to be, at a certain level, and potentially looking at more of an enterprise imaging solution. In this case, the application was mainly AP invoices. So, for the cost and yeah, mainly the cost and ROI, Kofax was actually a great solution for it.
Great. That is all the questions for now.
Okay. Well, we've got about a minute left, so we're actually near the end on this slide. So did a number of reporting improvements and enhancements. I mentioned unified navigation and work centers. I did want to show an image of the design for the invoice imaging and workflow process. So this is an example of what we built. It was important for Harkins to have the invoice image embedded in the workflow. So you can see, and this is an enhancement that we did, but we were able to use some of the delivered tools in PeopleSoft to specify what fields showed up on the voucher approval workflow page. So you'll see those on the left side, where you can see the image on the right side. You can do the coding. So a lot of the chart fields, the GL unit, the account, the department, the project, all the distribution level information can be coded from this page. You can insert multiple distributions. This is all done as part of the AP voucher approval workflow. Okay, and that actually, even though we're at the top of the hour, ends the presentation. So we're right on, Susan. Any more questions before we drop?
Oh wait, I have one more that just popped in. When was the conversation at FSCM done from SQL Server to Oracle? After upgrade or prior?
It was prior. So that was kind of part of the roadmap. Is they wanted to get both HCM and Financials on Oracle database, on OCI, have a consistent platform supported by Oracle. So that project was planned from the very beginning. And we staged the projects. The lift and shift was the first one, and then we did the database upgrade, and then we did the upgrade from 8.9 to 9.2 for Financials. So that was all part of the plan from the beginning.
Great. And I know we're over time, but last question, was there any performance degradation in OCI?
No, there was actually a substantial improvement in performance. So yeah, no degradation in performance. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for attending. We are recording this session, so we will post the recording and the slides. And thank you for all your questions and hanging on with us through the end. Have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.